Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael like to deliberate the Mount Rushmore of any given topic, and this week is no different as they and I deliberate the Mount Rushmore of people who turned their lives around. Jeff, you chose this topic.
I did.
Why? I'm fascinated by people who break free of the patterns that control them, that they've established, that grow up in a certain environment that supports a certain kind of lifestyle or behavior that might not be positive, might be destructive, or people who've just kind of worked their way into some self-destructive niche and aren't able to get out of it, or people don't think they will, and then they do. And we see this type of story happen a lot in entertainment. We wish people could pull out of the destructive patterns in their lives and make a positive change, but often they don't. So it's all the more fun to see and all the more great to recognize and celebrate those people who do turn their lives around. And honestly, I thought this topic would land a little bit closer to Christmas.
Okay, so I guess that's a scheduling thing.
Yeah.
on my half.
Yeah, well.
But it's funny that I think everybody likes a redemption story.
Yeah.
I think everybody ultimately, no matter how bad a person is, before the podcast started rolling, we were talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the Republican Party wants a redemption story to come back, and it's to be like Mike Pence, and he's the one that is like going to restore order and faith and all this thing. Like in all of this nonsense and garbage, there's ultimately there's the entire narrative of the Trump presidency is going to be like, the guy that was like the pious one that was working behind the scenes and that teamed up with the bad guy. But ultimately, they saw the light. Like, honestly, that's all we're going to see.
Yeah.
Is like, as soon as this shit is done with Donald Trump as president, it's going to be like, we didn't know with the error of our ways. And, we repent and we see, how bad it was. But thanks to Jesus. Oh my God. Thank God.
Yeah.
That is fucking coming in 18 to 24 months. And it's going to be fucking obnoxious. But people love to do that. They love the redemptive qualities of it.
Yeah.
And Trump's not going to be redemptive. He's an asshole till the day he has already died.
QAnon.
But people want to see that.
Yeah. I think that's why we go to see entertainment, why we read stories, to see other people do the painful transformation that we know that we should do. We all want to turn into this person who has this montage where they go through this amazing development process that isn't easy, but they transform themselves from a mediocre person to a champion, from a normie to a Jedi, or from a kid to a wizard, and we all hope that we are not going to transform into even worse visions of ourselves. So Mount Rushmore, people who turn their lives around. And I think the last time we started, I think I might have gone to Richard, so I'm going to go to Michael.
Okay. Well, my first choice was inspired by something you mentioned at the end of last week's episode, talking about what we were going to preview. You talked about Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh, yeah.
So, of course, I'm going to choose I'm going to choose the Grinch.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
Or as my child Felix used to call him, the Gunch.
The Grinch.
He just couldn't quite get there and is the Gunch. So whenever we see the Grinch, he is the Gunch.
The Gunch.
And everyone...
That sounds like my college nickname.
It does. It sounds like somebody would be in Jackass Part 2.
Yeah, Gunch. Oh, here comes the Gunch. It wouldn't be just Gunch. It would be the Gunch.
Yeah.
Everyone is familiar with Dr. Seuss's very famous How the Grinch Stole Christmas, about this miserly green hermit character that lives up on the top of a mountain away from Whoville and all these people that are just so lovey-dovey and love Christmas, and he just hates it, and he hates these people that have rejected him, or he's just a dick.
Yeah.
And he's like, I am going to do something about this, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to steal all of the Christmas trees and the lights, and I'm going to ruin Christmas.
Yeah.
For the only reason is because I don't like it, and it pisses me off. And he goes down and steals all the things, and then, of course, he meets someone, Mary Lou. Who?
Who?
What?
How old was she? No more than 2
Look, Jeff knows it by heart. How sweet is that?
by heart, which grew.
Which grew 3 sizes
Yeah.
to that day.
And
And he meets Mary Lou Who.
yes, and he, ultimately learns to appreciate Christmas, and
Yeah.
his heart gets bigger. His heart is described as being this tiny bean-like fragile thing, and he turns around and turns into a very generous and giving person. It's very much in the vein of Ebenezer Scrooge, this awful person that learns to love and learns to appreciate and respect and yada yada yada. But Dr. Seuss, he's so good at that.
Yeah.
He's so good at taking something that everyone knows and putting a child's spin on it and being imaginative and silly and.
Of course, I'm only familiar with it through the Jim Carrey version. No, I'm kidding. Why do they have to keep remaking
He's
this?
the Sir John
by the way?
Gielgud of Grinches.
Why do they have to keep remaking this?
I don't know.
The first one is perfect. It's perfect. You don't need to touch it.
What's interesting, and we've been watching. We are now in a new era of infotainment and information. We are ensconced in Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And we've been watching a lot of old Disney movies. We watched. My child is 2.5 years old, so his attention span is 40 minutes, no matter what movie. But we watched. Snow. We're going to start with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That's
And-
perfect place to start. Yeah.
yeah, first one, and he got to the point where, the dwarves are hemming and hawing around and doing whatever, but all he cares about is the Wicked Witch. He likes the
okay.
bad characters.
Yeah.
Not the Wicked Witch, the evil queen. And he wanted to watch the queen turning into the old hag over and over. So we watched some of that, and we watched some of Alice in Wonderland, and that was very interesting until about 40 minutes in, you lose the interest. But the Pixar films and the digital animation, I think he's really interested in because they're glossy. They almost look like toys. This kid would not care about the original animated version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. He would not care about the Jim Carrey How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I guarantee if he saw the digital animated How the Grinch Stole Christmas, I think he'd like it because
Because of the animation.
the animation, I think that there is a toy quality to all of these things. It's strange that this came up today. The toy quality to how they're like rounded, they kind of look like something that are kind of plastic. And I think kids really so I think that you'll see things slowly be made into these
Yeah.
plasticky CGI versions of it. I haven't seen that one, but I guarantee we'll probably see it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
Unlike the TV Grinch, which is, I think, a half hour with commercials, I imagine the feature film How the Grinch Stole Christmas,
Yeah.
or The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, goes into some backstory.
Oh, sure.
on
Yeah.
Why he
yeah.
doesn't like Christmas.
Oh, I have seen enough of... And plus, trust me, any bit is enough of the Jim Carrey version.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is all backstory and bad.
Yeah. I think the Dr. Seuss of is known
Gesundheit, by the way.
creating these individualist type characters, like a character who will not eat
The
green
thorax. Or
Well,
the
Lorax.
The thorax. The thorax. Sorry, we were watching
The
a Bugs.
sacrum.
We were watching a Bug's Life, so I'm in a different world right now.
Well, like
The Lorax, thank you.
Individualists, like
Yes.
oh,
interesting.
people who I don't want to eat the thing everybody wants to eat, and I think Grinch kind of fits into that a little bit. And like Charlie Brown in the Charlie Brown Christmas special, he's somebody who has a emotional barrier standing between himself and this holiday. But I think Grinch, Scrooge, almost the same thing. We know he's going to have a last minute
Yeah.
turnaround where he sees that the things he
The
believes,
Christmas spirit of these people who,
yeah,
even though they had their things stolen from them,
Right.
will still continue on, and that embiggens his heart. To
Yeah.
quote The Simpsons.
and like Scrooge, he's really giving them back things that he took from them already. He's been miserly to Cratchit as a employee. He's really
Yeah.
giving him income that he should have had in his pocket already. So even when he gives him the goose that's the one as big as me, Okay, I love it. I love it. And I am so entertained by that with Boris Karloff narration, with the Thurl Ravenscroft vocal, with the Hanna-Barbera outlines. No, sorry. The Seuss outlines, but with the definitely Warner Brothers type of Tex Jones type of...
It was Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones,
yeah.
sorry. Chuck Jones kind
Tex
of...
Avery, you're
Tex
thinking.
Avery.
That'd only be if the Grinch saw a hot-looking Grinch and went, "Oh!" And his eye is bugging out.
AKA, how strange is that? The mask, a very Tex Avery.
Oh, sure.
And then to
Jim Carrey, yeah.
Cool. So great pick. And moving on to Richard.
All right, my first choice was the first person I thought of when you brought this topic up. Was Robert Downey Jr.
Also on my list.
Okay, I kind of assumed
That's
that
a three-way Bing. That's a double point for both of you.
Bing and a bing and
he's
a
on
bing
and a
Noah's
bang and a
side,
boom.
so, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, incredibly talented actor. Also, someone who has probably done as many drugs as Keith Richards throughout his life, but has been sober since 2001, something like that. Yeah. Somebody who's dad was kind of this indie filmmaker in the 60s and 70s.
Inventor of dryer sheets, right?
What?
No.
I didn't.
Downey.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. There's they also named a town in Southern California after him. Great.
Avant-garde filmmaker father.
Yeah, and who apparently introduced his son to marijuana when he was 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's so Michael. Just so you know, that's bad parenting.
Mark it
don't do
down
that.
in my spreadsheet.
Yeah,
My Google Doc for bad parenting. Pot
at 6. Yeah,
Okay.
at least wait until they're 12. Someone who kind of came into the public eye as what Rolling Stone would later call the single worst cast member in Saturday Night Live history.
Yeah.
But redeemed himself, went on to do some great work in movies, including Chaplin, which is a great movie if you haven't seen it.
Oh yeah.
And then spent about a decade, lost. How Lennon had his lost weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Downey Jr. had like a lost decade and a half, basically.
I'm going to read through some of the. I have a list of
You
some
have
of
a
these.
list?
It's just like I have no idea what any of these are. That's Adequate, True Believer, Chances Are, I guess I've seen. Air America, Too Much Sun, Soap Dish was good, Chaplin's good, that was 91, 92. Heart and Souls I love. But then it starts to go The Last Party, Hail Caesar, Natural Born Killers, Only You, Richard III, Home for the Holidays, Restoration, Danger Zone, One Night Stand, Two Girls and a Guy, Hugo Pool, The Gingerbread Man, U.S. Marshal. Like
It gets really wonky.
It turns into Nicolas Cage at any point in his career type. Like, I don't know what Nicolas Cage has been in for the last 20 years. Some of it's familiar. A lot of it is just like, he just does everything.
Yeah.
But he definitely had that span, which is kind of I don't know, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was when he kind of came back, and that was like, everybody likes a person who is also contrite about it, and is also like, I had a bad time,
Right.
and I'm trying to get better.
Right.
Yeah.
Who doesn't make excuses about it.
That is the thing. That's the thing about this topic, is the people that admit it. And they're like, yeah, I've been a Grinch on a hill and I've been awful, or I did bad things when I was under a lot of drugs and a drunk.
I fell asleep in somebody else's, in a neighbor's house. That's the famous one,
Belushi.
I suppose. There was a point in time where he couldn't get work, like, because literally he couldn't get bonded. Like, insurance companies would not insure films if he was involved in it because he was such a risk.
That's wild.
To do something and ruin the production. Like, at some point he was on remember he was on Ally McBeal for a while?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And that was like his first of many of several abortive, hey, Robert Downey Jr.'s back type comebacks. And then cocaine happened, and he wasn't on the show anymore. All right. And even Jon Favreau has said that he really cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark partially because of Robert Downey Jr.'s backstory and kind of what he was able to bring to the table.
It's interesting, though. You see how many, like, all the nerds out there are so worried about who the actor is that's going to play. Are they going to represent the character on screen? And really, like a Robert Downey Jr. came in and even like just became that character, but then I think changed who he was in the comics. Like the comics had to start reflecting who he was.
That version of Tony Stark.
Yes, that Tony Stark. It wasn't just like, oh, this is what canon Tony Stark was. It was like, we kind of, it's got to be more like Robert Downey Jr. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the great casting things that they did, and it's kind of reflected throughout comics, where the comics had to reflect, or the movies had to reflect the comics, and now the comics have to reflect the movies.
Did that happen like with Batman? I wasn't reading. I was sort of reading Batman. At
I
the
don't
time,
think
of the original Batman, like
I don't
quote unquote Tim Burton.
I don't think that there was ever a Michael Keatoning of Batman.
Or was there a Tim Burtoning?
But there was a darkening of Batman. Like Batman went from being like the Danny O'Neill kind of blue and gray Batman to being like Batman that's dressed all in black. There's definitely that definitely happened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, Winfield, what's your second?
My second choice is someone.
That's third, actually.
Oh, that's right. So Richard, what's your second choice?
Okay. Yeah. See, good thing I caught this. Good thing somebody is
Wow,
running the ship
we really
properly over here.
Appreciate it.
I'm great. We didn't break any House or Senate rules within our Constitution of Mount Rushmore podcast.
Mr. Speaker, you have 30 seconds.
Someone's going to come in and bang a gavel, and we'll visit with the House parliamentarian, and it's Richard.
Go. My second choice, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series of books.
Yeah.
Someone who had a very rough time of things before the series became a series. Mm-hmm. Was basically, as she would, and somehow
I literally forgot what our topic was because I was just thinking about Robert Downey Jr., but it just turned your life around, and I was thinking, oh, who is a horrible person?
Yeah, you don't have to be a horrible person.
No, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, this can be people who are just
great
were in
choice, yes.
horrible circumstances.
Yeah.
And she had been like a not very great student. She had graduated like with some sort of like philosophy degree, I think, or something like that. I'm going to get 20 people correcting me on this, but was working for Amnesty International basically as a kind of a secretary and translator. Was in a really bad marriage that was abusive. Got out of that, was single, living with her kid, was on government assistance. The story wound up coming out that, she was homeless. And she wasn't actually homeless, but what she said is she was basically as poor as you could be without being homeless. Mm-hmm. But had this idea at some point had this idea for this story about a wizard. And, took about 7 years for it to go from her starting to write it to selling it to Simon & Schuster, I guess it was. And it coming out, and now she is literally like, I think she's like the 17th richest person in Britain.
Wow.
Just incredibly wealthy. Has donated like $250 million of her personal wealth to her various charities that she runs. And just, I think she is one of those people that when you see the meme of, look, this person was 35 whenever they published their first book. And that can be, I know that's a meme that gets kind of played out, and there's a lot of joking around about it. But this is like an example of, no, it really can happen. Mm-hmm. You really can be someone who's kind of deep in, relatively deep into your life. Mm-hmm. For all intents and purposes, it can seem like that your die is cast in life. But if you've got the talent and you've got the ambition and you've got the one great idea, things can happen.
I think celebrating early promise is a beautiful story for news and for Disney animation.
It's great. It's great for rock and roll.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah,
like when you're 21 and you've written the fucking best album that you'll ever write in your life. Wow, it's awesome when you're 21, 22, and you're out there and just touring. But what happens when you're 35?
Yeah,
and that you've been working at it for 10 years,
I do
7
think
years.
For artists, that idea that reaching your creative maturity is something to look forward to in the 30s or 40s, or being able to find the persistence of vision or the time to put aside to go off and accomplish that dream is something to celebrate. It's a beautiful thing when we get to tell that story.
Also as like a writer, it's just a perspective. I'm sure your perspective changed. I'm sure what Harry Potter was when she was 28 is different than Harry Potter when she was signed with Simon and Schuster at 35. The story changes, the drafts changed, who all of these characters are. I'm sure that it would be interesting to see like original drafts and original. You'll never see it,
Right.
but like who these people are and how these things change over the course of nearly a decade is fascinating.
And I think with the Harry Potter franchise in particular, I don't know that that's a story that someone could have written at 19 or 21 or 25.
Right, yeah.
I think it's a story that you need to have some perspective on life and get a lived in life a little bit, because it's not, I mean, if you haven't read it, and Jeff, I know you haven't read Harry Potter, it's a kid's book, yes, but it's also a very dark book in a lot of places. And I would have a hard time imagining myself, that's all I can project is myself being 19, 21, 22. I was an idiot. I didn't know anything about life.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is before you got to the Mount Rushmore podcast recording studio, Richard and I were having a discussion about
Jeff and I
were having a discussion about George Lucas as this person who has written the Star Wars as he initially wrote it. When he was 26, 27, he was this young indie filmmaker, and who George Lucas eventually became when he's in his 50s and 60s, remaking Star Wars and writing the prequels. That is a lifetime different person.
Right.
Yeah.
And like whatever your ideas of what the Star Wars should be are so different from where you were when you're like bucking the studio system and 27 and saying F you to people and I'm going to do all these different things. Like that is 26 to 50 and 50 plus is a huge different person.
Reading about the making of the new Dark Crystal Netflix series. And Henson at that age had already done the Muppets and Sesame Street and already had some successful Muppet films. And had he done Fraggle Rock? I'm not sure. But when the Dark Crystal...
Dark Crystal's before Fraggle Rock.
Just before Fraggle Rock?
Yeah.
But this kind of a hippie...
Yeah, Fraggle was the one that came back, that brought him back into children's television.
Okay.
He's like, what... With
allegory.
HBO, we can do something different now, and let's make it very peaceful and anti-war. And
it seems like Henson was still a dyed-in-the-wool hippie environmentalist, even though he was a business person, entertainment industry tycoon. And I think the Lucas that wrote Star Wars was still a person who was part of the subculture a little bit, or the counterculture. He was an outsider.
He was like a pal of Coppola and like those kind of indie filmmakers.
Yeah. Well,
those were the people that he, like when he first shot Star Wars, those were the people he was getting feedback from.
Yeah, his friends were Spielberg and Coppola, and they were like, what is this?
The guy who
they hated it.
The guy who wrote the prequels is an action figure salesman. He's
right.
He's a toy maker.
It's funny though to think of Jim Henson and George Lucas of the same generation. I think Jim Henson a little bit older than Lucas, or maybe a decade older. But ultimately, they both entrusted Disney with the people that were going to tell their stories going forward. Like I watched a documentary actually pretty recently about Jim Henson and how he was just so frustrated with the management of the Muppets. Like the business of the Muppets was just like, I don't want to do this. And it was like when he signed the deal with Disney, it was like, who are the people that are going to take care of the characters in the way that they should be?
Right.
And it's interesting to see like George Lucas was another one that was like, who are the people that are going to invest the money, going to do Star Wars the right way, and whether
he thinks that's the right way now or not is left open for interpretation.
He has 4.1 billion reasons to be like, well, I can say what I want, but I guess I know what my price is on what that. But it's just very interesting. Two very interesting, creative people ultimately were like, oh, we're going to sell it to this giant multinational, And yet the giant multinational has been doing great things with, well, at least half of them.
Yeah.
Right.
They got to do better.
They did both go to London to do their thing. Like, didn't Muppet Show?
Muppet Show was
shot in London. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
A Lou grade production. The big who was
Blade
like
Runner
the big
guy, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, so it is our halftime. Give the gift. This is our holiday drive is beginning. Give the gift of the Mount Rushmore podcast.
It's pledge drive season
Pledge
here
drive
at
season.
the Mount Rushmore podcast.
We want to go into the new year's swinging. 2020 hindsight is what you'll have when you, look back and have given the gift of the Mount Rushmore
$20
podcast.
a month you'll receive.
Yeah.
You get this tote bag.
Tote bag.
It does.
It's an NPR tote bag. It's actually just one that I had laying around.
It does look like a Ralph's paper bag, and one of the handles has been kind of pulled away because they put too much stuff in it. We didn't want to double bag it because of the environment, but now you have to carry this thing by one hand. We get it.
There's the Three Casters CD. It's not the Three Tenors, but Richard and
It
Michael
says
and myself. We do look like
Pet Boys on there, but no.
We're not.
We
Man
crossed that
anymore,
out.
And you get the smug satisfaction knowing that you supported the underdog. You can support our last minute life turnaround where we go from being an emerging but highly well critiqued podcast to a powerhouse media conglomerate juggernaut.
Are we selling stuff
I'll tell you how you do that.
Are we selling to Disney?
Is there going to be a Muppet version of
God,
Mount
that'd be
Rushmore
great.
podcast?
Well, I do work for the company. They own every creative thing I do. So sorry, guys. I think they own this anyway.
That's about the best we could hope for, really.
The way you give the gift of the Mount Rushmore podcast is you just share a link with all your friends and post about it and on social media like Facebook. And that's really the best thing you can do. And think how smart it's going to make you look at your holiday cocktail parties when you're dropping all the knowledge that you learned into the podcast and you're following us on Instagram and Twitter. That would be pretty cool. And then rating and reviewing past episodes. Give it a 5. I think that's maybe close to the top of the rating.
It doesn't matter. Even if that's like halfway.
Yeah.
We'll take a 5.
We'll take just-
How sad is that?
Yeah. Just so that
take a 5.
it looks like some of those nibbles on this hook. Well, after that, I don't know how we can debase ourselves anymore. We are back from our halftime, and I'm imploring Michael to share in his selection of the Mount Rushmores of people who have turned their lives around, his choice of the third.
Well, Jeff, do you have any halftime adjustments that you want to recommend? Did you see something in the first half that you'd like to see employed in the second half?
I will say that my list was all real people.
I'm desperate.
You need a W. My list was all real people. But that doesn't mean that their lives aren't essentially fiction to me because I don't know them. But,
well, I am going to keep with fiction. And also, this is a nice transition from Richard's last choice of J.K. Rowling to mine, which is a Roald Dahl story called The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar.
I'm not familiar with that.
It was eventually released in a 1977 book, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Six More, just 7 stories, 7 short stories. And it's about this rich asshole named Henry Sugar who just has too much money, and him and his friends just go around. They just bet on things. They have so much money that it doesn't matter. So they bet.
This is trading places, by the way.
A little bit. We'll get. Oh, that's good. So he's just at a friend's house, and they're just out drinking, or just drinking at a friend's house, and they're playing some card game. But there's 5 of them, but there's only room for 4, and he drew the short straw. And he's in the library, and he is just like perusing the library of all these books. There's just like, I don't give a shit about books. Who cares? And he sees this little tiny book, and he starts reading it, and it's about this, like a doctor's account of this Indian gentleman who can see without his vision. He can wrap his towel around his head, and he can do all these amazing things. And he's over the years studied with a yogi and learned how to see without using his eyes. And he's just fascinated by this. And he goes and he starts studying with the same yogi, and he learns to see things behind, like, of course he uses it for nefarious purposes. He wants to use it to gamble. So he like sees what someone else is doing on the other side of their card. And he can kind of see into the future a little bit. So he starts using it to gamble and make all this money. And he's just going around the world to casinos. And he's just like, he gets to the point where it's just like, this is too easy. What is the point of all this? And he has like this epiphany one night, and he just starts throwing money off of his balcony. And he's just like, you can have my money. What's the point of all this? And then someone comes up to him and says, well, if you want to be charitable, stop causing a riot with all this, this cash that's flying around. So he starts going to casinos and he starts gambling, but he starts getting recognized and starts getting kicked out of casinos because he's going to raise all this money to give away. But then he's recognized, and so he hires the best makeup artist. And so his life turns into this thing of going and pilfering from casinos and dressing up in disguises and stealing all this money using his newfound yogi powers and creating all of these like Henry Sugar orphanages around the world. And what is a Roald Dahl story without orphanages being involved? But I just love the story. It's such a wonderful thing of a person that is so rich and so just opulent that they got to the point of boredom and had to look inside to see what can they do.
That seems like a theme with Dahl, observing the Willy Wonka character who's got this amazing factory.
When you have so much money and you don't, and the money, starts to change. The money starts to change you, and hopefully it changes you for the better. Ebenezer Scrooge as well as the person who's money eventually and change him for the better. But like, I just love the story. I love also putting it over on a casino.
Yeah,
it's the Ocean's 11 sort of aspect of like taking it back from the system that has built upon. Like he didn't. I guess
for bringing down the house.
Yeah, I guess he was. He had these powers to.
He was a cheat.
He was a cheat in a way. He just learned how.
Right.
He didn't do it. He wasn't looking behind the card other than he was looking behind the card.
Right. Was
it written from a child's point of view of what would be fun as a kid, what powers would be fun as a kid, or was this something for
No, it was more of I would say, Roald Dahl definitely has there are the two sides of Roald Dahl. There are like the acidic, like if you read like his collections of short stories, his humor is very wicked.
Oh, yeah.
His children's books, there's an aspect of wickedness to them, but they're kind of couched within a bit of silliness, whether it's Twits, that's about, these awful people that have to stand on their head and are glued upside down, or, Willy Wonka is certainly silly.
Dahl
has these very two halves. He's a children's writer, and then he's an adult writer. I think he did a lot of
in diplomacy, essentially spying on Hollywood. So after the RAF, I think he took diplomatic positions, and one was in Los Angeles. And so I think he married Patricia O'Neill. There was somebody, he eventually married a celebrity actress, but his outsider position within the entertainment industry early in his life was a thing of relish for him as this individual who was former RAF pilot. I think he's of Swedish heritage, but then lived in England. And so he has this definitely almost like a espionage type of life. So
well, he was friends with Ian Fleming.
Yeah. Right.
And they did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang together. Yeah.
What a couple of badass dudes. Yeah, shot down over enemy territory, fight their way out. Like, now I'm going to write a kid's book. Baller.
Anyway, check out Henry Sugar. It's fun.
Manfredi.
All right, my next choice is a woman named Georgia Durante. Not related to Jimmy Durante. She started off... Same spelling.
Okay, just check.
For the record, for your record keeping needs, Michael. She was a model back in the 70s. She was actually a Kodak girl, which was one of the models for the Kodak camera company. And she was, at the time, maybe one of the most photographed models in the world. If you flash forward about 30 years, she, at that point, had become a very successful Hollywood stunt driver.
Wow.
Had done like ads for Chevrolet, a bunch of movies, a Cindy Crawford Pepsi commercial. And while that is all interesting, right? Like that enough would make an interesting life. It's what happened in the middle and how she got to that point that kind of, I think, is relevant to our topic. As she was a model, she started hanging out at nightclubs, including this one nightclub. There's an after hours nightclub in New York, which, as most of them were back at the time, were mafia related. And one day she is there, and a fight breaks out, and somebody gets shot. And they decide they need to take him to the hospital right away. So they flip her the keys and says, "Hey, Blondie, you got to drive him. Get him there as quick as you can." And so she apparently starts cutting through alleys and just doing all sorts of fancy driving shit, and gets him to the hospital. And these mob guys are basically like, "Whoa, you really know how to drive. We could use you." So she starts becoming a driver for the mafia.
The wheelman.
She's the wheelman.
Wow.
She is driver. She is baby driver. And she said, according to her, she didn't know what at first she would park a few blocks away, and then they would come and they would drive away. And she didn't know exactly what they were doing until one day they came running. There were sirens, cops come in, and they said, "Floor it." And she went full Steve McQueen to get them out of danger. And so by that point, she had got married to someone who was mob associated. There was a big mob war that had broken out, and it was an abusive relationship. And she just grabbed her car keys and her kid one day and said, "We're driving. Let's go," and drove out to Los Angeles. Had like $7 to her name. Was staying with a friend of hers who was an actress, I believe, and was watching TV and realized, oh, wait a second, all of these car commercials, they have people who are driving those cars, and you can't see their faces, but somebody is driving those cars, and I know how to drive a car. So she would just start going to commercial shoots and just bugging the directors like, "Hey, I know how to drive. Why don't you let me do this?" Until they eventually gave her a shot, and this turned into this very successful career as like I said, as a stunt woman. Actually, I think she founded her own agency for female stunt women at one point. So just a fascinating story of someone whose life took many ups and downs, and at one point was at this really low point of basically, like you said, Jeff, being a wheel person.
Yeah.
And was able to turn their lives around and do this amazing thing with their, at that point, third act in their lives. I mean, most people don't get 2 acts.
Right.
She got 3.
Driving is one of those skills, and driving well is one of the skills that can apply to a lot of things in life. It's like, if you are like someone like who's like the famous army guy that was
Arlie Ermy.
Arlie Ermy, who's like, what can you do after you're in the army? You can teach how to be in the army.
Yeah.
Driving is so ubiquitous with just daily life that if you are a great driver, you can turn that into driving for commercials, teaching people how to stunt drive, doing all these different things. That it is just this, but it's very unique. Like a stunt driver or a professional driver isn't something you think about all that often when you see the commercials of what's the guy that's driving the Lincoln?
Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey.
All right.
He's in there behind a blue screen, and then he's like pretending how to drive. Does he know how to really drive?
Or they're pulling him in one of those like prop cars.
Yeah. Does he really know how to drive? Not the way that this woman does.
Right.
Like there is an art to it that I think is pretty interesting that people don't think about. That you don't think about, like the person that's driving in those commercials. They're very precise. They're very.
And it's amazing to me that it's. I would assume most people who do that driving used to be race car drivers, had been trained in it, had gone to driving schools, and it's something that you have to like really like
Yeah, the
hone
origin
yourself
story of this is
as a career.
fascinating.
But her just sort of like getting thrown the keys with a guy bleeding out in the back seat and saying drive, and that's how she realizes she's good at it. What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned to drive on like a Sega Game Gear when it was just like I remember playing it with my friend Eric's house. I'm like, okay, you don't have to press the brakes. You just release the gas to slow down a little bit. And I was like, now I can hit this turn, and then you're halfway through the turn, and then hit the gas again.
That's
It's like,
driving.
that's how I drove through it. Like,
And that's also why I don't drive with Michael.
well, but I'm holding up the game gear as I'm doing it. Which
Yeah,
should
that's
be my
really
problem.
worries me a little bit. Yeah,
It takes a lot of batteries. The game gear.
it does.
Not that he ever had a downturn, I think, but Jimmy Van Heusen, the Fly Me to the Moon
Sure.
songwriter, was also a Navy test pilot throughout much of his early career.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he would fly Frank to Palm Springs. If he would get hired in Hollywood to go write a movie or music for a movie, he would fly from New York to Hollywood. He'd fly himself in his own plane. But he would also crash these planes, then get up and go right.
Another badass.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Man Winfield. Who is it?
Man Winfield.
Man, oh, you're a man, and you're Winfield.
What do you
Man,
got? What do you
comma,
got?
Winfield. I have someone, my last choice is someone who turned their lives around twice.
Oh.
The first time for the worse,
Oh.
the second time for the best. And of course, our good friend, Anakin Skywalker, a.k.a.
Yes.
Darth Vader.
Okay.
He made some really bad choices that eventually led him down the path to become Darth Vader, Lord
yeah.
of the Sith. And then at the last moment, he made one good choice that helped save the galaxy as we know it when he threw the Emperor down a pit and was like, stop hurting my boy.
Right.
He should have said, I would love it with like a country accent. You get out of
Come on
here,
now.
Emperor Darth Sidious. You get down that pit. You get off of my boy. Just throw.
Billy Bob Thornton as Darth Vader.
You stop lightening up that boy. Just get him out of here. Tossed him down. Of course, we all assume Darth Sidious is going to
He's-
return in some way.
Oh, he's dead completely, except for in the trailer.
I've heard some laughter. But, the story of Anakin Skywalker, a.k.a. Darth Vader, is great. It's the story of this kid who is supposed to be the savior of the Jedi, supposed to save the galaxy, and, of course, succumbs to darkness, turns his life around from one where he was supposed to be a good guy. He was supposed to be a good guy, and then...
Not just a good guy, but the good guy.
The good guy.
The chosen one.
the good guy. And then it requires his son's love to be like, you know what? This isn't very good.
Wasn't he already? Did he already do one turn? Do we consider the fact that he went from slave child to pod racing phenom?
Yes, he's had a lot of twists and turns. But he, like, to go from being like a slave kid to being like, within this monastic Jedi cult.
Okay.
It was always, you're trending that way. He wasn't a bad kid, but it took like a bad influence once he got.
From a success standpoint, probably less was expected of him as a young person.
Yeah.
And so by joining the Jedi, that's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, but he didn't, I don't know. Is that turning your life around? He wasn't a bad kid before he joined the Jedi.
Oh, well, J.K. Rowling's wasn't bad. I'm just saying that he's...
Made something of himself that was where it...
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
He's got lots of twists and turns.
No,
in his...
I think it's just supporting your argument.
He's trying to help you out in Numbskull.
It's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
He's gonna...
He's a wacky dude.
Yeah.
But, I think ultimately what's great about Vader at the end is just that moment where he's just looking over. He's looking back and forth. He's like, there's this guy that's getting zapped. And he's my son.
Yeah.
And there's this old dude who's just been a dick to me my entire fucking life. And I've been probably trying to kill him. To be honest, I've been trying to get rid of him for most of my life. You don't see a lot of that, but most likely Darth Vader's been trying to get an apprentice and get rid of him.
That's
and
the
all-
way of the Sith, right?
Yeah. But like, I just love that moment where he's looking back and forth and he's just like,
You can almost see the light bulb go on.
Yeah,
above his head.
he's
Wait a second.
Not just here.
not just the light bulbs on his chest, but and then like at the end, that pathos of just like, tell your sister I was right. You were right. You saved me. I'm gonna die, but this was enough. I did just enough.
Yeah.
I did just enough to get rid of this old asshole. And
That's what's beautiful about redemption and of all the Christian themes that go through Star Wars, this idea that if you repent, it makes up for this lifetime of horrible.
he
horrible
murdered people, and they
homicidal.
blew up Alderaan, and billions of people died.
A whole children
Genocide
Jedi
of all this stuff,
children.
and at the end, it was just like, you know what? You did enough of a good thing that,
Yeah.
like, yeah, maybe it's okay. At the
And
end.
were the Grinch to be not creepy and twisted and green and ugly, and if Vader were not to be so menacing, the turnaround would not be as profound
Yes.
and as exciting
Yeah.
and dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Ricardo.
All right. Speaking of
Jimmy Durante.
that'd be incredible. Speaking of people with faces that have been scarred and pocked by life.
What's up? I'm on your list.
No, Danny Trejo.
Oh, I was gonna pick him. That's a
This
great
is-
choice.
You know what? Yesterday, literally yesterday, had
Yeah.
Trejo's tacos for the first time.
How was it? How were they?
Fucking delicious. I had this
I've heard the
asada.
cauliflower ones are fantastic.
Emily had the cauliflower taco. She loved it. She
what
said
do
it
you
was
just cut the meat?
She
Tell
said it was
me,
the
Michelle.
best of the three.
Was it?
I had the asada burrito. It was great. It had like this little pesto sauce in here. We are now sponsored by Trejo's Tacos.
That would be
It was
great.
really fucking good. No shit. I'm so excited to hear this story.
So he was.
I don't know anything about Danny Trejo.
Oh, he was somebody who basically was a juvenile delinquent, was involved
He
in
looks like it.
drugs and alcohol.
Looks like it.
Spent most of the 60s and the early 70s in and out of prison. In 1972, he was in San Quentin. Got involved in the boxing program there.
Spanish for the Quentin.
The Quentin, yes.
Of the Quentin.
And was a champion by 1972, he had been a champion boxer at San Quentin, had gone through a 12-step program and gotten sober and got released, and was just kind of out living his life. And he was actually a youth drug counselor. And one day he's working with a kid, and the kid's like, I'm actually acting in this movie Runaway Train, and I've got this cocaine problems, and I'm having problems being on set. Could you help me out? So he goes on set, and he's working with a kid. And the writer of the movie, this guy named Edward Bunker, was had actually been a crime author, and is someone who similarly had a real-life criminal background, had served with Danny Trejo in San Quentin,
Oh wow.
recognized him and said, hey, why don't you come? Eric Roberts needs to get trained as a boxer for some scenes. Why don't you do some work with him on this? And yeah, we'll get you a small role in the movie. So he winds up training Eric Roberts, getting a small role in the movie as a boxer. And basically just from there, just kept getting smaller roles, started getting slightly bigger roles, and eventually became Danny Trejo.
Yeah.
Actor, ultimate, who's that guy? Who is now, kind of ascended above that rank to become this entrepreneur and general person that you would like to hang out with. And it's
Yeah.
just an amazing redemption story.
Yeah. A few of his describing his early performances as a heavy, and he would see how much money they're giving him, and he knew it was movie magic,
Right.
but he would acknowledge how much money that was and ask the filmmaker, how bad do you want me to hurt this guy? That's a lot of money. Like, am I supposed to really mess this guy up? No, it's all acting.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And someone who now has kind of traded in that sort of, because, obviously in his early roles, they were all the heavy. They
Yeah.
were all sort of the henchman type or the gang member type guy. And it's interesting now, like if you look at his roles anymore, it's like Spy Kids and
Yeah.
all these movies where he's kind of playing off of that. And now he plays, because I think it's almost impossible for Danny Trejo to be cast as the bad guy now. Because everyone knows him as this like charismatic, incredible redemption story.
Yeah.
Hold on,
So now he winds up.
I got to check to see if he was in one of those Sylvester Stallone. Was he in one of the
Expendables.
Expendables? Let's see.
I don't know.
I don't remember, but he may have been. I wouldn't know. But I think it's hard for now. He plays these basically the guy who looks tough but is actually has a heart of gold type guy. Because I think his public persona is so much that it's almost like he spent most of his career being typecast as like the heavy, and now he's typecast as the heavy who's actually not.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, that's just from 2014. A Voodoo Possession Bullet. Muppets Most Wanted as himself.
Yeah, the best
In
line
the
in the
Blood,
trailer.
Badasses, Reach Me, Vengeance, The Book of Life, Snapshot, Reaper.
Look, they're not all great movies.
Man,
But there are a lot
this
of 'em.
dude is he's just a fucking worker.
You know, that makes me think
Cyborg
about
X
the
as Captain Machine Gun.
the turnaround that happens is really a right sizing, because I feel like that turnaround doesn't happen if you aren't authentically
Yeah.
somebody that could be that new person. Like,
Right.
I imagine Danny Trejo's environment was much of who he was more nurture than nature. Like, he was raised in an environment in which violence, crime might have been the only rite of initiation for a young man, might have been the only economic opportunity for him.
And I wonder how much of it is like, because I'm looking at his filmography, and it goes, from Dusk Till Dawn 3, Animal Factory, Reindeer Games, to Spy Kids. And I wonder if all it takes sometimes is just to be in a kid's movie and be like, oh, this is the guy. It's not as scary as you think he is.
Yeah.
And you're just in a kid's movie, even if you're playing the character of Machete, who later went on to be like Machete Kills and all this stuff. But like, I wonder if it's just being around the environment of working with like other kids and things of like, oh, yeah, he's just a guy. He's just an actor. We can cast him in other things where he's not this horrible person.
Yeah. Maybe other than Tom Hanks, the most beloved person in here. And certainly a Los Angeles, particularly here in Los Angeles, I would say a Los Angeles institution. Like, people know Danny Trejo, and they have, I think, strong feelings for him, which is why I think Trejo's Tacos and Trejo's Donuts and all those things have worked.
Man, really good. Sorry. Literally yesterday was like, this is really good.
All right. I'll check it out.
Who is more loved as a Los Angelino?
Vin Scully.
I'm going to offer a different one.
Angeline.
And that is incredible. No one dislikes Angeline.
Nobody's mad.
I was going to say like Flea or Anthony Kiedis.
No, there's a lot of people who don't like Red Hot Chili Peppers, although I think they like them personally. even if they don't like their music.
Like they've written the same song for the last 15 years, but
Right.
like Flea seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, he's got the bridge. Is that his
He's
thing?
he's a smart guy and like a big Lakers fan, and like
Yeah.
who doesn't like Flea? He's in Back
Right.
to the Future 2 and 3. He's cool.
Hey, tune in for our hot takes episode. You might find out that some people don't like Flea. That's coming up next week. The
I'm gonna
hot
write
takes
that down real quick.
episode.
I'm gonna do a quick research on because I need a fourth,
The dark
I gotta
side of Flea.
and I got to figure out what's wrong with Flea real quick.
Okay, so some great choices. Michael really needs this, Richard. I will say RDJ is going to be on there. I put it, you put it, you put it. So RDJ.
And Bink.
I will also say that I had thought about Danny Trejo, but didn't put him down there. But I want to pick Danny Trejo.
Super pick.
And definitely Anakin Skywalker.
Good pick, yeah. That's a good one.
And you know what? Because I had thought of this within the framework of a holiday episode, The Grinch. Is that 4?
That's 4.
Let's get the F out of here. This has been the Mount Rushmore of, you know what, guys? I think, here, I got this giant present for you.
Oh,
There you go. There you go.
unwrapping sounds.
Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle.
Gila Monster! Going to your neck. This has been the Mount Rushmore of people who turn their lives around. As always, I'm Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.
I'm Gila Monster.